Welcome back to No Apologies on Beck. I am Lori Hins, your host, and with me as a guest today, Jason Bohrer. Now, Jason is the president and CEO of the Lignite Energy Council.
Correct.
And I thought this is so interesting because there's so much that's been going on with your industry in the last week. I'm very grateful that you're on.
I am glad to be here. First time on the program and looking forward to it. It's
Excellent.
Awesome.
Well, let's talk first about the Lignite Council and the Energy Council and what exactly you do, who its stakeholders are, things like that.
Right. So the Lignite Energy Council is the trade association for the lignite coal industry in North Dakota. You like to just think of it as the Chamber of Commerce for everybody who touches lignite.
Got it.
So the mines, the power plants, but also there's several hundred people who, they work in associated industries. Maybe they're putting in wiring or plowing the roads and those types of things all form the Lignite Energy Council.
Now, this week was a very, very big week. As a lot of people may have seen on news sources across the state, there was a very big transfer that happened.
Absolutely. The Coal Creef Power Station, which is the largest power plant in North Dakota, was transferred from Great River Energy to Rainbow Energy. And this is the type of thing that doesn't happen maybe ever.
Right.
But it's like one of those once in a generation things. People look back to and they say, hey, I was there when they built Coal Creek Station. Mm-hmm. This is one of those things 40 years from now, people will look back and say, I was there when they transferred the ownership. Mm-hmm. It's a momentous day.
Well, let's go to do the backstory of this and what happened leading up to this transfer. For some reason, it was going to close.
Right. So, and there's a lot of decisions that go into what a utility does with all of its assets. Mm-hmm. And it's more and more influenced by market conditions that are set outside our control.
Right.
And the previous operator, Great River Energy, had figured out a way in the markets to do better without this power plant. And so they said, we're just going to close it down, and that is our path forward. Now, luckily for North Dakota, they had always prioritized the operation of Coal Creek Station. They had invested in it. It was extremely well run. It was efficient. It was clean. And so when they said they were going to close it, a whole group came into action and said, wait a minute, is there a better way to do this that could maintain the jobs, the economic impact, and all of those things associated with the power plant?
It would have been devastating.
Yeah, there's 750 jobs were at stake, and sometimes you just hear that number and it's in a vacuum. But think
you're not realizing those are 750 families.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So those are people who their lives are thrown into turmoil, and those families, they make up communities. Communities are made up of families, and families are made up of individuals, right. And that all puts, it puts a picture together that makes North Dakota what it is today.
Mm-hmm. Had this transfer not occurred, what would have happened in terms of not only economically, but with regard to the power for the state of North Dakota?
So this is one of those issues that takes a little bit of time to explain, because most of the power that is produced there mm-hmm. is shipped into Minnesota.
Right.
So for our day-to-day lives, our lights would still come on. But that electricity wasn't necessarily going right into North Dakota's mm-hmm. homes and businesses. But it does provide stability to North Dakota's homes and businesses. And so even though that electricity might not be going from Coal Creek to your house, you need Coal Creek to keep those lights on in your house and keep the electricity rates stable in times of natural disasters or uncertainty.
This was kind of a long process too, if I remember correctly. I remember when we heard that it was going to close down to now, when it's now transferred and saved, what I was thinking was there must have been a great deal of hurdles to leap over in order to get to this point.
There were, and that's where all of the praise goes to this core group of industry people, the owners, Falkirk, the mine, continued to provide a reliable source of coal. And they were that bedrock of stability throughout this whole thing to say, regardless of what happens, we can provide coal affordably and reliably. But you've got government entities, you've got potential owners and operators who are coming in, and every time they thought they have it solved, there was something else would come up.
Right.
And that makes this roller coaster ride that is hard to overcome.
Well, it is a thrilling thing. I know it was very highly touted. We've got some pictures that we can show that maybe we can talk about a little bit here with this too. So this was the celebration. You want to speak to that a little bit and talk about how that went? And
yeah, so you see the introduction is provided by some of the principals. These are the people who we have to thank for it. John Bohrer, who's been involved with Great River Energy forever, and Stacy Chider, who is the man with the vision, to say, here's what we see the future can look like. And then you got this list: Governor Burgum, Lieutenant Governor Sanford, Senator Hoeven, Senator Kramer, Congressman Armstrong participated virtually, and then the employees who are making this happen. And each of these played a different role in the obstacles that you're talking about.
Right.
Each one of them had different obstacles, and without that team that you see on the screen, none of that would have turned out favorably for us.
We've got a couple more photos to show here too, so let's take a look at those. This one here is just, that's so exciting to see.
It's amazing.
And then one more, and this last one here, this is a really historic day.
Yeah, so, you know, when you look at the work that the legislature did getting ready for this potential transfer and being able to say, there's nuts and bolts and contracts, obstacles going on behind the scenes that the leaders of North American Coal, Rainbow Energy Services, they're working behind the scene to make that transfer happen. But at the same time, once the transfer is done, it has to be successful. It has to be economically competitive. It has to be secure from regulatory challenges. So the legislature, led by people like Senator Jessica Bell, and they had to create a framework that after the handoff was complete, that the plant was still could successfully operate. And so that the legislature had a role to prepare for after the transfer, while all of these folks are working behind the scenes dealing with the obstacles to make the transfer happen in the first place.
I understand this is one of the most efficient and cleanest plants in the, probably in North Dakota for sure, but probably in the country.
You know, all of our North Dakota power plants are extremely efficient. They've had billions of dollars invested in them. So certainly when you look at the coal power plants across the country, this is, you could say it's as clean as they get, and you'd be accurate. In fact, our North Dakota air has never not been among the cleanest in the country because all of our power plants make that investment. But that's one of the things that made this transfer possible, is because Great River Energy had consistently invested time, technology, money in making sure that Coal Creek was as efficient as it could be. It was as clean as it could be, because they're not handing over a problem child to a new owner. They're handing over the keys to a Ferrari and saying, don't crash, don't drive off the lot. Right. But that it was, everybody played a role in that. But it started with years and years of support from Great River Energy, and that included years and years of support and investment from North Dakota legislators as well.
Now, this time we're going to talk a little bit about something that happened, well, partly it has to do with what happened in this last year. We had a really interesting year in North Dakota with regard to our skies. They were hazy and they were smoky so much. It really didn't have too much to do with necessarily even North Dakota fires. A lot of times it's elsewhere in the country. But we had so many wildfires that affected our air quality. It was really interesting this last year, Jason.
Yeah, if you think back last year and say you walk outside and you maybe get a beautiful sunset, but right. You have
we did.
This smoke and haze that is just lingering in the air. And it's amazing to think that we had that, not because of anything that was happening in North Dakota. Even some of our own fires that were happening in North Dakota didn't have much of an impact on that, but all of that was because of what was happening thousands of miles away in California, in those western states that had significant fires going on at any given time.
Now, why am I bringing this up? Well, because the ever-knowing EPA, the omniscience of the EPA, is very concerned with the air quality across the country, of course, and in North Dakota.
Yeah, so the Environmental Protection Agency is charged with implementing a couple different regulations. Some of them are dealing with health and human safety. the things that might cause asthma or whatever it may be. Some of the regulations involve visibility. And I think you look at the beautiful vistas we have in North Dakota and you want to be able to enjoy them. You go to Theodore Roosevelt National Park, you want to be able to see across. So the government has delegated that authority to EPA to figure out how to manage that.
Right.
And so the EPA is in the midst of a process that will review what our visibility is in the state right now.
I like to brag when I get to travel across the country about our air quality, because it's just second to none. It's beautiful blue skies, lots of fresh, clean air. Even in the cold winter time, it's
Right.
amazing, right? So the EPA is tasked with doing this. There are two main areas from what I had read that would be involved in this. There is Teddy Roosevelt National Park, but then there's another one.
Lostwood.
Okay.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about Lostwood, people who may not know about that. It's a wildlife refuge, correct?
So yeah, and the things that these two have in common are they both are covered by regional haze regulations, which say that you have to be able to have visibility conditions at Lostwood and Theodore Roosevelt Park that are equivalent to essentially natural conditions. So when the early native residents lived here, what did Theodore Roosevelt look like to them? How far could you see across the park? That's what we're trying to recreate today, because again, those are special places. We want people to have good experiences there and enjoy them as nature created them.
Well, we are really good at that, I think, personally, in the state of North Dakota, making sure that what we are doing does not affect negatively our air quality.
And the truth is, you say you're proud of North Dakota. Here's another fact that you can use. North Dakota is one of only 4 states that has never violated any EPA standards dealing with air quality.
Wow.
So you think of the energy industry that exists here, the ag industry that exists here. We have this economic powerhouse that exists in a world where they still hold themselves to these high standards of environmental stewardship. And one of only 4 states who's never not been at the top of the class.
That is exciting. That is a great stat. I'm going to try to remember that too. Now, has the state filed its specific plan for?
Yeah, so the state gets to move first, and it files they call it a state implementation plan, and that is consistent with the principles of cooperative federalism that our Constitution was founded on, and that says the state knows the state best. Right. Here is how the state believes we should approach the issue of visibility. And then the EPA can look at that, critique it, and either accept it or reject it if the EPA thinks the state is not doing enough.
So those are the next steps after this. It's in their,
yes.
their court. Ball's in your court now.
Yeah. So the EPA will look at that, and they will make a determination of whether they believe the state is doing enough to improve the visibility at these areas in North Dakota.
Well, we are A students, so.
Correct.
So the effort to improve air quality in national parks and wilderness areas, what happens if the government gets our ideas but they don't accept them? Then what happens?
So if the federal government rejects what the state is proposing, they can come up with their own plan, and they can impose their plan upon us without really much we can do about it. And you can imagine, is a plan crafted in North Dakota by North Dakotans going to do the job better for North Dakota than a job that was crafted 3,000 miles away in Washington, D.C. by people who perhaps have never even been here? Right. And is more of a one-size-fits-all. And that's what you worry about, because they have the authority to do that if they don't believe that our plan is sufficient. So
explain to me also how this would be costly for industries in North Dakota, because if they impose these things, then we have to go by their standards and probably put a lot of money into improvements.
Right. So here's a way to think of it. When you walked out last summer and the sky was hazy, and it's clearly due to wildfires in the west, now the EPA could look at that and they could turn to the state of North Dakota and say, you need to shut down your power plants, you need to shut down transportation, oil and gas development, all those things, because the haze is bad. And they could try and put the burden to improving the haze that we didn't cause onto parties who didn't cause it. And of course that's going to be expensive because it's not the source of the problem.
Right.
But the EPA, if they interpret the data differently, certainly has the power and authority to do that.
Of course, they've got to be aware that the cause doesn't have anything to do with us, but they don't take that into consideration, or?
They should take it into consideration, and I think that many of them recognize the conundrum that is air quality when something happens in the west can drift to the east. They recognize that, but the question is, do they agree with our conclusions that the primary reason is because of the fires, or do they agree with the conclusion that we can continue to improve and continue to have a robust energy industry in North Dakota?
Right.
And so you just worry, how are they going to weight these different variables? If they don't weigh them the same as the state does, then you start getting into this conflict.
Exactly. Well, in the last 45 seconds here of our segment, thank you, first of all, thank you for coming on and giving us all this great information. But just give me a little synopsis of the Lignite Energy Council, and if people want to learn more, where they can go.
Right now, the best place to go to learn for more of this stuff is lignite.com and cleanairnd.com.
Okay.
Those are the two places that will give you all the information you could need about the lignite industry and even this regional haze issue that we're dealing with.
Wonderful. Well, great information. I appreciate it. And we will wait to see what happens with the EPA. Yes. And we are very, very excited about those people who get to be at Coal Creek and retain their positions. So, Jason Bohrer, thank you very much for being on No Apologies.